Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video we're going to be doing my top 8 intelligence builds in Elden Ring, and I gotta say, honestly, this was the easiest one to do because mages are ridiculously overpowered. At number 8 we have the Wing of Astel, a really powerful weapon especially for bigger bosses in the game. The Ash of War on this one, unique Ash of War, will scale entirely with your intelligence stat, so you can pump up intelligence and get a ton of damage out of it. This weapon, by the way, also does increased damage to gravity-type enemies, so it will do increased damage to Astel, Radon, etc., so there's an advantage there, but overall, it's incredibly solid as a mage option for large bosses, big targets in the game, where you can get a ridiculous amount of magic damage. All footage is New Game Plus 7, the max scaling of the game. As always, I pretty much do all of my footage on New Game Plus 7, so all bosses have the maximum HP they'll get. Let's go into equipment. We have the Wing of Astel, preferably plus 10, any staff for Terra Magica, any seal for buffs. The Spellblade set will boost this, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Shield Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. Now for this video there's going to be two separate sets of stats, ones that I did for spells particularly, and then the other ones for weapons, which included faith buffs, so I could use Golden Vow, Hellish Rebury, etc., and this is the version for the weapons. For those that use these timestamp though, I always show stats at least for a couple seconds at the end of every clip so you can get the stats for each one, but there's going to be two different sets as mentioned. We have 65 intelligence, 33 faith with the faith tier, 50 vigor on all mage stuff, and as mentioned, Terra Magica, Golden Vow, and Hellish Rebury. At number 7, we have one of my favorite spells in the entire game in Carian Slicer. I love Carian Slicer, it's insanely good, it's a really good pocket spell, and you can get a ridiculous amount of damage out of it using the Jellyfish Shield, Lucette Staff, and Terra Magica. It's also one of the most FP friendly spells in the entire game. You can see I'm using Lucette Staff in combination with the Jellyfish Shield, but Lucette Staff will typically cost more per each spell, but in the case of Carian Slicer it doesn't even matter that much because you're getting a ridiculous amount of damage per FP cost. If you never tried Carian Slicer, give this one a try for sure. You can't miss out on this one if you're a mage because it's a fantastic pocket spell to have to do an insane amount of damage as mentioned for little FP. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have Lucette Staff plus 10. We have the Golden Vow, Ash of War, and a dagger. We didn't invest in Faith for this one. The Jellyfish Shield, any seal for buffs. You can check out the armor set there. We have the Graven Mask Talisman, the Graven School Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman. We had the Magic Tier. The Faith Tier was in there by accident, so you can use whatever tier you want for the second slot, and Margit Shackle to stun Morgott. And for stats, this is going to be the mage set of stats where we don't go for faith buffs. We have 80 intelligence, we have 50 vigor for all the mage stuff, 23 mind, 22 endurance, 20 strength for the Jellyfish Shield. I had the faith tier equipped by accident. That was just an accident. My base faith was 8. You could use whatever tier you want for the second slot, and then we're using Terra Magica and Carian Slicer. And next up we have Carian Grandeur, which is a powerful Ash of War that doesn't scale with whatever weapon you're using, rather it scales with your intelligence stat as a whole, so it doesn't matter what weapon you decide to use, which makes it perfect for daggers and lighter equipment loads too. Yeah, just quickly of note, for all the weapon stuff I'm doing faith buffs, so you're going to need the faith tier for all of those. For the ones that are just pure mage builds and spell builds, you can use any tier for the second slot. Let's jump into equipment. We have Carian Grandeur on any dagger works, any staff for Terra Magica, any seal for buffs. The Spellblade set will boost this, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier you're going to need for this one. Let's jump into stats. And we're back to our more battle mage stats where we have 65 intelligence, 33 faith with the faith tier so we could do our buffs. We have 50 vigor, 25 mind, 22 endurance. And then you're going to be casting Terra Magica, using Golden Vow, using Hellish Rebury, and then you're going to use Carian Grandeur, which is fully chargeable and boosted by the Godfrey Icon, by the way, so be sure to hold that one all the way. And now we're getting into my favorite one on this list, and at number 5 we have Ice Spear, which will scale with dexterity and intelligence, so you could use it for both dexterity builds and magic builds too. It really works well at high levels, also in cold affinity too. Ice Spear is pretty insane because, well, a couple reasons. It has decent range at a mid-range, it's really spammable, which is a huge part of why it's good. It's pure magic damage, has both dexterity and intelligence scaling, it builds up on frost of course, and it does a little bit of posture damage, 20 each time as well. Yeah, I love Ice Spear. It's one of my favorite Ashes of War in the game. I like the Bloodblade Ash of War too. That's my favorite Bleed Ash of War. But my favorite Magic and Dexterity Ash of War is Ice Spear. It's truly incredible. Has a lot of versatility. It's a lot of fun too. We're going to jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know. For equipment, we have the Guardian Sword Spear and Magic Affinity, which will actually get more damage than the Clayman's Harpoon. Any Staff for Terra Magica, any Seal for buffs. The Spellblade set will boost this. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 50 Vigor, 25 Mind, 22 Endurance, 65 Intelligence, 33 Faith with the Fate Tier so we could do all our buffs, and of course, we're using the Spellblade set, so we're not really worried about 51 poise here because that'll increase the damage. It's a total of 2%, by the way, per piece on Magic Ashes of War, and then we're using Terra Magica, Golden Vow, and Hellish Rebury to buff this. And at number 4, we have Comet Azur, which is an incredibly powerful spell that has a really high damage ceiling, but it mostly works best for standing targets. I know some people think this deserves to be number 1 because of the amount of damage it can do, but keep in mind a lot of the faster moving bosses in the game and a lot of scenarios where this just isn't going to be great, but for certain bosses like O'Neill, Commander Niall, Moog, etc., even Morgott after the scene, it's incredible and can absolutely destroy them. Which is why it's number 4 on this list, and I have a good setup for it. By the way, that was the buffing order at the beginning. We're going to be using the Infinite FP tier, so the tier actually gets strength last in this case. We're going to jump into equipment now. And we have Lucette Staff plus 10, we have the Golden Vow, Ash of War, and a Dagger, the Jellyfish Shield. You don't need the Seal, we're not doing Fate buffs. We have Azur's Glintstone Crown, which will boost the damage on Common Azur, Graven Mask and School Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, and Cerulean Hidden Tier. And for stats, we have 50 Vigor, 23 Mind, 22 Endurance, we have 80 Intelligence. We're not doing Faith buffs for this one. We're using Terra Magica and Comet Azur. Keep in mind to use the Golden Vow Ash of War first, the Jellyfish Shield, and Terra Magica, and then drink your tier last because that's going to have the infinite FP for 15 seconds with the Cerulean Hidden Tier, a big part of this build. And at number 3, we have Death's Poker, a ridiculously powerful magic weapon. Despite the descaling, it scales entirely with your intelligence stat on the Ash of War. It also does a ridiculous amount of frost build-up too. Another cool option is the fact that you have a couple different things you could do with Death's Poker. After the initial input, you can use an explosion like the one there, and then you could also use a Trail of Frost too, and the Trail of Frost can build up frost relatively fast. It's the faster way of doing that. However, the explosion can do massive damage. So it really comes down to your choice what you want to do with Death's Poker. Overall, you really can't go wrong with this weapon. This is a weapon you can get pretty early game too. You can cheese the Deathbird that's in Caelid. Overall, an incredibly powerful intelligence weapon and one I recommend, especially for having fun time. Yeah, out of all the mage stuff that I've done, Death's Poker is one of the most enjoyable ones because it has such a high damage ceiling, but at the same time, it's kind of slow, so you have to land it right. It does take a little bit of skill to use, but the payoff is phenomenal for this weapon, and the scaling, despite the D, is quite good. Let's jump into equipment. And we have Death's Poker plus 10. We have any Staff for Terra Magica, any Seal for buffs. The Spellblade set, once again, will boost this. We have the Shard of Alexander, Ritual Shield Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, once again, these are our weapon stats with 50 Vigor, 65 Intelligence, 33 Faith with the Fate Tier so we can use our buffs, 25 Mind, 22 Endurance. And then we're using Golden Vow, Hellish Rebury, and Terra Magica to get a ridiculous amount of damage out of Death's Poker. And as you already may know, Death's Poker is incredible. It's a very, very strong mage weapon. Definitely something worth trying. And at number 2, we have the godlike weapon that is the Darkmoon Greatsword. The Darkmoon Greatsword is truly incredible. By the way, you could add the Jellyfish Shield if you want to boost this weapon as well. It's one of the few Ashes of War that can be used with the Jellyfish Shield, but I don't really think we're going to need it here, given that we're doing 4,000 damage per beam. And in just 4 hits, goodbye Draconic Tree Sentinel on New Game Plus 70. It's typically tough, but when you have something as powerful as the Darkmoon Greatsword, and mages typically are easy mode, he went down very fast. The Darkmoon Greatsword has that ability, especially when charged. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Darkmoon or Moonlight Greatsword, preferably plus 10. It wasn't even plus 10, wow. We have any Staff for Terra Magica, any Seal for buffs. Spellblade set will boost this. Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, it's chargeable. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And same stats as most of the weapons. I set it up so that you could do all the weapons with the same stats and all of the spell-based builds with the same exact stats if you notice, for convenience, which gives you a lot of variety and a chance to try out several different builds. That's why I have the 17 decks, so you can switch to Death's Poker at any time too. Terra Magica, Golden Vow, and Hellish Rebury. Next up here, we have at number 1, no question about this, it is by far Night Comet. Like the Blasphemous Blade, I would have loved to change this one up, but after doing some Night Comet builds and then having people get back to me and saying that it was so good that it made the game ridiculously easy that they switched to something else, just goes to show how truly ridiculous Night Comet is. Not only is it chargeable and does pure magic damage, but all of the bosses in the game can't see it, they can't dodge it, and if you've used Night Comet before, you'll probably already know this, the range on it is absolutely absurd. It has incredibly long range too, and the damage it does, it really is just the best. Let's jump into equipment. And we have 2 Stabs of Loss, or 1 in the Jellyfish Shield. We have a Dagger with the Golden Vow Ash of War. Any seal for buffs. We hit 51 poise. We have Graven Mask Talisman, Godfrey Icon, it's chargeable. Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier. And for stats, this is one of the spell-based setups, so of course we have 80 intelligence. Don't worry about the faith tier, that was there by accident. Our base faith is 8. You can use whatever tier you want for the second slot. We have 50 vigor, 23 mind, 22 endurance, 20 strength, the Jellyfish Shield. And we're using, of course, the Golden Vow Ash of War, Terra Magica, and Night Comet. I wanted to show really quick, too, that NPC enemies, especially quick ones that normally can dodge different things, cannot dodge Night Comet because they cannot see it since it's a night sorcery. This applies to Melania, by the way, and also applies to Radagon, who typically can block spells. He cannot block Night Comet. Thanks for watching this one. Definitely be sure to sub if you're not subbed to this point. You're not going to want to miss out on all the Elden Ring content. We'll be doing more builds soon, including the top 8 strength builds. That's probably the last one on the list, I believe, for the damage types. By the way, I've made a playlist for the damage types for early game guides, for build crafting. All that stuff is now easy to find on my channel. I hope everybody enjoyed this one, and I will catch everybody soon. Can't wait for the next video.